Husband and wife had a spat, and in frustration, the wife called her mom. "He argued with me again, Mom. I'm coming to stay with you." Her mom replied, "Oh no, darling. He's the one who needs to face the consequences. I'm coming to stay with you." A guy goes over to his friend's house, rings the bell, and the wife answers. "Hey, is Tony home?" "No, he just went to the store." "Well, do you mind if I wait?" "No, come on in." They sit down, and the friend says, "You know, Nora, you have got the most beautiful melons I've ever seen. I'd give you $100 just to see one." Nora thinks for a moment, then figures, why not? She opens her robe and shows him one. The friend thanks her and tosses $100 on the table. After a bit of silence, he says, "Those are so amazing. I'll give you another 100 if I could see both of them together." Nora thinks for a second, then decides, what the heck? She opens her robe again and shows him both. He thanks her, leaves another 100 on the table and says he has to go. Later, Tony comes home, and Nora says, "You know, your friend Chris came by today." Tony pauses for a second and asks, "Oh, did he drop off the $200 he owes me?" There was a man who spent his entire life saving every penny he could. He was notorious for his tight grip on his money, valuing it more than almost anything else. One day, he fell seriously ill and was informed by his doctors that his time was short. Knowing this, he made a peculiar request to his wife. "When I die, I want you to take all my money and bury it with me. I want to take it all to the afterlife." His wife, knowing that this would leave her with very little, promised to honor his request. The man eventually passed away, and his funeral was held at their local church. As he lay in the casket, the widow sat beside their best friend, dressed in black. Just before the undertakers were about to close the casket, the widow suddenly spoke up. "Hold on a moment," she said, grabbing a shoebox she had brought with her. She placed the box in the casket, and the undertakers then sealed it and began to roll it away. Her friend, puzzled, asked, "What was in that shoebox?" The widow replied, "He wanted to be buried with all his money, so I put it in there." Her friend was astonished. "Are you serious? You buried that miser with all his fortune?" "Yes," she said. "I promised him I would, and as a good Christian, I couldn't lie. I put the money in the casket just as he requested." "But how could all that money fit in such a small box?" her friend asked. "Well," the widow explained with a smile, "it was a bit of a challenge, so I gathered it all together, deposited it into my account, and wrote him a check." A wife sends a text message to her husband. "Honey, don't forget to pick up some bread on your way home from work. Oh, and your girlfriend Valerie says hi." Husband texts back, "Who's Valerie?" Wife replies, "Nobody. I just wanted to make sure you'd read my message." Husband responds, "Well, I'm actually with Valerie right now, so I thought you saw us." Wife, shocked, "What? Where are you?" Husband, "Right outside the bakery by the door." Wife, rushing, "Stay there. I'm coming right now." 5 minutes later, she texts him again, "I'm here at the bakery. Where are you?" Husband, "I'm still at work. Now that you're there, why don't you grab the bread and bring it home?" A little old lady went to the grocery store to buy cat food. She picked up 4 cans and headed to the checkout counter. The cashier looked at her and said, "I'm sorry, but we can't sell you cat food without proof that you actually have a cat. Management says some elderly people buy it to eat, so we need to make sure it's for your pet." Frustrated, the little old lady went home, grabbed her cat, and brought it back to the store. Satisfied, the cashier sold her the cat food. The next day, she returned to buy 2 cans of dog food. Again, the cashier stopped her. "I'm sorry, but we can't sell you dog food without proof that you have a dog. Management has the same concerns about dog food." Annoyed but determined, the little old lady went home, brought her dog back to the store, and was finally allowed to be the dog food. On the 3rd day, she came back carrying a small box with a hole in the lid. She approached the same cashier and said, "Stick your finger in this hole." The cashier hesitated. "No way. What if there's a snake or something dangerous in there?" The little old lady reassured her. "I promise there's nothing in this box that can hurt you." Reluctantly, the cashier stuck her finger into the hole, then quickly pulled it back out, wrinkling her nose. "That smells like crap," she exclaimed. The little old lady smiled. "It is. Now, I'd like to buy 3 rolls of toilet paper. Moral: don't mess with old people." 2 friends are walking through a wildlife park when they suddenly encounter a lion that looks like it hasn't eaten in days. The lion notices them and starts chasing after them. Panicking, they run as fast as they can, but one of them starts to tire. Desperate, he says a quick prayer. "Lord, please turn this lion into a Christian." He glances back, and to his amazement, sees the lion drop to its knees. Relieved and overjoyed, he stops running and begins walking towards the lion, confident that his prayer has been answered. But as he gets closer, he hears the lion praying, "Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, which I am about to receive." An award should go to the Midwest Airlines gate agent in Chicago for being witty and sharp, while still making her point when confronted by a passenger who probably deserved to ride in the baggage compartment. For anyone who has ever had to deal with a difficult customer, this one's for you. A busy Midwest Airlines flight was cancelled, and a single agent was left rebooking a long line of frustrated travellers. Out of nowhere, an irate passenger shoved his way to the desk, slapped his ticket down, and barked, "I need to be on this flight, and it has to be first class." The agent remained calm and replied, "I'm sorry, sir, I'll be happy to assist you, but I need to help these folks first. Once I've taken care of them, I'm sure we'll work something out." Not satisfied with her response, the man raised his voice, so everyone in the terminal could hear. "Do you even know who I am?" Without missing a beat, the agent picked up the microphone for the public address system. "May I have your attention, please?" she announced, her voice echoing through the terminal. "We have a passenger at Gate 22 who does not know who he is. If anyone can assist him in identifying himself, please come to Gate 22 immediately." The line of passengers erupted in laughter. The man, now red-faced, leaned in and hissed, "F*** you!" Still unfazed, the agent smiled sweetly and said, "I'm sorry, sir, but you'll need to get in line for that as well." A farmer was driving down the road with a truck full of fertilizer. A little boy playing in his yard spotted him and called out, "What's in your truck?" "Fertilizer," the farmer replied. The boy looked curious and asked, "What are you going to do with it?" "Put it on strawberries," said the farmer. The little boy thought for a moment and then said with a grin, "Well, if you lived here, you'd know we put sugar and cream on ours." A preacher was wrapping up his fiery temperance sermon. With great conviction, he declared, "If I had all the beer in the world, I'd take it and throw it into the river." Raising his voice, he continued, "And if I had all the wine in the world, I'd take it and throw it into the river." Finally, with arms lifted high, he thundered, "And if I had all the whiskey in the world, I'd take it and throw it into the river." He sat down, and a solemn silence filled the church. O'Malley, the song leader who had dozed off during the sermon, stood up carefully and, with a grin, announced, "For our closing hymn, let's sing hash 365, Shall We Gather at the River?" At 3 o'clock in the morning, a man and his wife were jolted awake by a loud, persistent pounding on their front door. Groaning, the man reluctantly got up and went to see who it was. Standing in the pouring rain was a drunken stranger, swaying unsteadily. "Could you give me a push?" the man slurred, water dripping off his soaked clothes. The husband stared at him in disbelief. "Absolutely not," he barked. "It's 3 in the morning." He slammed the door shut and stomped back to bed, muttering angrily under his breath. "Who was that?" his wife asked, still half asleep. "Just some drunk guy wanting a push," he grumbled. "And did you help him?" she pressed. "Help him? Of course not. It's the middle of the night and it's pouring out there." His wife sat up, turning on the bedside lamp. "You've got a short memory," she said sternly. "Don't you remember when our car broke down 3 months ago? Those 2 kind strangers stopped to help us without hesitation. How can you refuse to do the same?" The man sighed heavily, knowing she was right. Grumbling under his breath, he got dressed and trudged back out into the storm. Stepping into the cold rain, he called into the darkness. "Hello? Are you still out there?" "Yeah, I'm here," came the faint response. "Do you still need a push?" the man yelled. "Yes, please," the stranger replied eagerly. Squinting into the gloom, the husband shouted, "Where exactly are you?" "Over here," the voice called back. "On the swing." A man stepped out to the street and flagged down a passing taxi. As he got in, the cabbie smiled and said, "Perfect timing. You're just like Brian." "Brian? Who's Brian?" the passenger asked. "Brian Sullivan," the cabbie replied. "He was the guy who did everything right, just like how I showed up when you needed a cab. That kind of thing happened to Brian all the time." The passenger chuckled. "No one's that lucky. Everyone's got their share of bad days." "Not Brian," the cabbie insisted. "He was the perfect guy, a top athlete. He could have won the Grand Slam in tennis. He could have played golf with the pros. He sang like an opera star and danced like he belonged on Broadway. You should have heard him play the piano." "Sounds like quite the man," the passenger mused. The cabbie nodded eagerly. "Oh, he was. And smart too. He had a memory like a computer. Never forgot a birthday, knew all about gourmet food, and even knew which fork to use. He could fix anything. Me? I blow a fuse, and the whole block loses power. But Brian? He had the golden touch." "Wow, he must have been something," the passenger said, shaking his head. "There's more," the cabbie continued. "He knew every shortcut, could avoid any traffic jam. Not like me. I'm always stuck. And when it came to women, Brian knew exactly how to make them feel special. He'd never argue, even when they were wrong. His clothes were always spotless, shoes shined like mirrors. He was flawless. No one could ever compare to Brian Sullivan." The passenger, thoroughly impressed, asked, "So, how did you meet this incredible guy?" The cabbie glanced in the rearview mirror and grinned. "Oh, I never met Brian. He died. But I married his widow." A married couple in their early 60s were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary in a cozy, romantic restaurant. Out of the blue, a tiny, yet enchanting fairy appeared on their table. She said, "For being such an exemplary married couple, and for your enduring love, I will grant each of you one wish." The wife immediately responded, "Oh, I would love to travel around the world with my darling husband." With a wave of her magic wand, the fairy made 2 tickets for the Queen Mary II appear in her hands. The husband thought for a moment and said, "While this is incredibly romantic, such an opportunity is rare. I'm sorry, my love, but I wish to have a wife 30 years younger than me." The wife and the fairy were both dismayed, but a wish is a wish. The fairy waved her wand again, and poof! The husband became 92 years old. Moral: men who are ungrateful should remember that fairies are female. The guys were all at deer camp, and since they had to bunk 2 to a room, no one wanted to share with Daryl. His snoring was legendary, loud enough to keep anyone awake. To be fair, they decided everyone would take turns rooming with him. The first guy had the unlucky task of sharing with Daryl the first night. The next morning, he stumbled into breakfast, hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot. "Man, what happened to you?" the others asked. "Daryl snored so loud I didn't sleep a wink. I just sat there and watched him all night," he replied. The second guy took his turn the next night, and by breakfast, he looked just as bad, hair standing up, eyes red and tired. "Man, what happened to you?" "You look terrible," they asked. "Daryl snores like a freight train. I just sat there and watched him all night," he groaned. Then it was Frank's turn. Frank, the big, tough ex-football player, was as burly as they came. The next morning, he showed up to breakfast, bright-eyed and refreshed, smiling like he'd just had the best night's sleep of his life. "Good morning," he said cheerfully. The guys were stunned. "What happened? How'd you manage to sleep?" Frank grinned and said, "Well, when we got ready for bed, I tucked Daryl in and gave him a kiss goodnight. He sat up and watched me all night." A mother was worried about her little boy walking to kindergarten on his own. Her son insisted he was big enough and didn't need her walking with him. Wanting to respect his desire for independence, but still wanting to ensure his safety, she came up with a plan. She approached a neighbor and asked if she could discreetly follow him to school each morning, keeping her distance so he wouldn't notice. Since the neighbor was up early with her toddler anyway, she happily agreed. It'd be a nice way for her and her daughter to get some morning exercise. For the next few days, the neighbor and her little girl quietly trailed behind Timmy as he walked to school with a friend. The 2 kids strolled along, chatting, kicking stones and laughing, while the neighbor kept a watchful eye from afar. By the end of the week, Timmy's friend finally noticed the woman and her toddler following them every day. She turned to Timmy and asked, "Hey, have you noticed that lady following us to school all week? Do you know who she is?" Without missing a beat, Timmy replied, "Oh yeah, I know who she is." "Well, who is she?" the girl asked, curiosity growing. "That's just Shirley Goodness and her daughter, Marcy," Timmy said casually. His friend looked puzzled. "Shirley Goodness? Who are they and why are they following us?" Timmy shrugged and explained, "Every night, my mom makes me say the 23rd Psalm because she worries about me. And in it, it says, 'Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life.' So I guess I'll just have to get used to it. May surely goodness and mercy follow you all the days of your life." I bet that made you smile.